Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them, and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: the client cheated us, lost in court, and now owes twice as much money. The second story: when our salary was half that of the labor market. First my colleagues quit, and then I did. The second story: I embarrassed my boss despite coming in on my day off, working for 10 hours, and canceling an important appointment just to make his millionaire friend happy. F small businesses who use "we're a small business" or family as an excuse to exploit and abuse workers. The first story is: so you stop payment on your car repair? Let's play. Players are John, owner of auto shop, Tim, other mechanic, A-Wipe, customer, and me, other tech. Names changed to yada yada yada. This occurred in the mid-90s, so the details may be a bit off. A little long as well. All amounts in US dollars. John owned a small automotive repair shop doing general repairs on most brands of vehicles. There were 3 of us working there, the owner and 2 techs. We got a call one day from a new customer whose BMW would not start and was nearby at a golf course. I sent a tow truck and had the BMW put into a stall. Sure enough, it would crank over but not fire off. And start. I checked for spark and there was plenty. Now to check the fuel system. No fuel pressure. Went under the hood again to check the fuel pump relay. No problem there. Now to check power at the fuel pump. The manual said the fuel pump was in the inner fender liner in front of the left rear wheel. Pulled the wheel off and the liner back, and lo and behold, no fuel pump. There was a fuel filter there though. Went back to the manual and looked up the next production year BMW, and it said the fuel pump was internally mounted in the fuel tank. Cleaned myself up well. Car had white leather, and removed the rear seat to access the fuel pump. The fuel pump only has power while cranking or engine running, so I got Tim to crank the engine over, while I checked power to the fuel pump. Pump had power to it. I priced out the fuel pump and wrote the estimate. It came out to approximately $625, broken down like this. Labor for diagnostic time and install 2.5 hours at $75, $187.50. Fuel pump $300, total $459.49. Tax and shop supplies $38.18. New total $525.68. When the customer called for the estimate, Tim answered the phone and gave him this total, $525.68. No towing included. It was on the ticket, but Tim just missed it. At the last minute, I remember the fuel filter and ordered one, and I installed it on the vehicle at no labor, just to the cost of the fuel filter plus a little tax. When A-Wipe came to pick up the car, I heard a lot of loud voices in the office, and went in and took over the customer. He wanted to know why his bill was $625 instead of the $525 he was quoted. I explained that the quote Tim gave him did not include towing of $75, and that I had forgotten the fuel filter at $25 plus tax, and had installed it at no labor charge. A-Wipe raised his voice, suggesting that the fuel filter was the problem and not the fuel pump. I assured him this was not the case, and he demanded the old parts. No problem, as we would just throw them away anyway. He wrote a check. About a week later, the check comes back as stop payment. Turns out A-Wipe lived in another county, and our DA's office, local prosecutor, will not take action on out-of-county checks. John calls the customer to see why he would stop payment on the check. A-Wipe ranted that he had taken the fuel pump to his mechanic, and that guy said the fuel pump was good, and that we had ripped him off. Total BS, as a restricted fuel filter won't hardly keep a vehicle from starting, although it might affect the acceleration a bit. Fast forward to a few months later and we sued A-Wipe in small claims court. A friend who is an attorney represented us for free, and said if we collect to add $500 for his fee. We paid $25 for a process server and he was served. A-Wipe never showed up for court, so we won by default. Now his bill is around $1175 with court costs, attorney fees, and such. In Texas, if a customer does not pay for a car repair, we can enforce a mechanic's lien on the vehicle, and even take it from anywhere we find it. Also, it can't be sold to another part with a lien on it. A couple of months later, we were telling the story to another local who owns a tire shop. Turns out the same A-Wipe had bought a set of tires and stopped payment on that check as well. A-Wipe was trying to play the system, knowing that out-of-country checks won't be prosecuted. A few months after that, I saw the BMW at the local golf course parking lot and sent a wrecker to pick it up. Now the bill is $13.50 with the impound fee. The wrecker company took the car to their yard and then called the local police department to inform them of a repossession. When A-Wipe finished his golf game and came out to go home or wherever A-Wipes go and found his car missing, he called the police to report it stolen. The police informed him it had been taken on a mechanic's lien and to not come on our property unless it was to pay for his outstanding bill. A-Wipe called up and yelled at John, cursing and hollering. John hung up on him. A-Wipe called back, cursing and hollering again. John hung up again. A-Wipe called back a third time and John told him, "If you want to discuss this like an adult, I will. Otherwise, I'm not going to listen to cursing and yelling." John explained that the bill to redeem his car was now $13.50. A-Wipe said, "I'll sue you." John asked him if he remembered being served by the constable a few months ago, that we sued him already and he never showed up. A-Wipe then said he would just let the bank take the car back. Okay, no problem there. The bank will pay the bill and auction the car, and whatever wasn't covered by the auction, A-Wipe will still owe. I got the call from the bank asking how much was owed on our bill. I informed them of the balance due, and I asked the banker what was owed on the car. The balance at the bank was around $9,000, and the car was worth around $6,000. At auction, it might bring $3,500. So if A-Wipe let it go back to the bank, not only would he have a repossession hurting his credit, he would still owe the bank around $6,850 and have no car. A-Wipe's wife called and asked to come in and pay for the car. We told her the amount and told her only cash. She came and paid. Now for the revenge. We called our friend at the tire shop that A-Wipe had screwed over on the tires. I think it was around $1,100. He arranged for a wrecker to pick up the car after A-Wipe's wife paid us and took it to another impound yard, incurring another $175 impound, plus the $1,100 for the tires. So for A-Wipe trying to screw us out of $625, he ended up paying us $13.50, and our friend's shop $12.75, for a total of $26.25. I bet his wife was peeved, and that probably put an end to his golfing for a while. The second story is, we, the entire tech team, quit. So a few years ago, I got hired as a developer at a small startup. Salary was never discussed in the interview, and there was no salary range posted either. Boy, was I young and naive and fresh out of college. I was supposed to get the salary emailed to me via my job offer, but they conveniently forgot to email it, so I got it in person on my first day, for half the market value. I don't have any other offers or experience at the time, so I accepted, hoping I could climb the corporate ladder. Again, young and naive. The tech team was just 3 other devs, and we got along very well. Fast forward a couple of years, I had gotten a few raises, but still at half the market value, which kept going up with inflation. The last 6 months of work is when the writing really started appearing on the wall, that it was time to jump from the sinking ship that was my job. They ended all remote work, ended shorter summer hours on Fridays, and the biggest one was how often they kept repeating the plea to vendors that they're a small company, aka they have no money. This was the biggest red flag that it was time to update my resume. My teammates picked up on this too, and one by one they started turning in their notices with jobs lined up. I was the last remaining developer and employee with any technical knowledge. The first thing I did was ask my boss for a raise to account for the higher workload, and he told me he couldn't do it because he had to account for the replacement employees' salaries. The workload was starting to pile up as I did the work of 4 people on my own. Not one employee got hired at the half the market salaries my job was posting, even after they took down the salary ranges hoping to attract more applicants. I eventually got a raise after they gave up on hiring replacements, but I still sat at half the competitive rate. After months of "no one wants to work anymore" type comments from my boss, as no new teammates were hired, I was burning out and was seriously contemplating leaving without a job lined up, just to focus on the leak code grind full time. I really didn't want to have a gap on my resume, and I needed the money, so I saw things through. At one point, the burnout got at its worst. My temper was getting shorter. My work ethic was getting worse, my motivation for anything was dwindling, and I was becoming an absolute shell of a person. I had had enough at that point. I walked straight into my boss's office and demanded my salary be doubled, to match the average market salary, to compensate for doing my entire non-existent team's workload on my own, and to cover the transportation costs from revoking remote work. My boss told me that I already got a raise, and I shouldn't be expecting them more than once a year. He also said that he can't afford to give anyone a raise due to increasing costs, and I shouldn't expect for another year and a half. What really put the final nail in the coffin for me was him telling me that even if I got another offer at the market rate, he wouldn't even be able to counteroffer half of what I'd be getting. It was time to start looking. After a month, I finally accepted an offer that paid the competitive salary for developers, and I handed in my notice. Reality began to sink in for the management team as they didn't even bother trying to counteroffer, and tried guilting me into staying. But I told them, this isn't a negotiation, this is a notice. And remember how they couldn't afford a 50% pay raise? Well, the new job posting for my position had a 50% higher salary. Just goes to show you that companies will pay you with as little as they can get away with. The new job was fully remote and compensated much higher than what I was used to, that it was so foreign to me. I told my former teammates that the last part of the squad left, and now we've all moved on to bigger and better things. We're all going out to dinner to celebrate our new beginnings. And the last story is, I embarrassed my boss coming in late on my day off and working 10 hours to appease one of his good customers. I work at a small business that wraps cars. In my 1 year since starting there, I picked up the trade, became the lead installer, and helped double the company's output. I work 8 to 10 hours a day depending on how busy we are, and have an hour-and-a-half commute both ways. I will preface this story by acknowledging that due to my commute and me taking morning classes, I get to work 3 to 10 minutes late quite often, something that has been spoken about and accepted by all 3 of my bosses. I always stay a full 8 hours, and even stay late to make sure everything gets done. I'm often the last one to leave. It's also not a job that survives on me getting there at whatever time sharp. In fact, all of my bosses come and go at varied hours, because we have a receptionist who's in charge of greeting and taking in appointments. My job is to wrap. I do it well and I do it efficiently. Now on to the story. One of my boss's good customers and friends needed work done ASAP. After rescheduling 3 times, he tells my boss that the only day he can bring in his car is Saturday, and that it had to be done the same day. I don't work Saturdays because I freelance on the side in the hopes of building my career. My boss practically begs me to come in and work, so I agree, but let him know that I had a freelance appointment about 80 miles away that same day. He acknowledged this and says just get what you can done. He tells me his friend is dropping his car off first thing in the morning, so that I could come in early and work on it. I get to work at 7:50, open up the shop and get to work. A 2-hour job just turns into a 10-hour day. I had to cancel my appointment, but hey, at least the job gets done. Yesterday, my boss pulled me aside and says, "You embarrassed me on Saturday," because his friend got there at 7 a.m., and no one was there to greet him and take the keys to his car. Even though we have several spots and methods for dropping off keys. His friend also lives 10 minutes from the shop, while I live an hour away. He then goes on about how even though I'm a really hard worker, sacrifice a lot of my time on the commute alone, stay late, etc., that me not being able to be there as early as he wanted on Saturday shows that I'm unreliable. My blood starts to boil as I realize that I'm now being berated after coming in on my day off, working 10 hours, and canceling an appointment that worked towards my ideal career. I stand there silent so he can talk himself out and walk away after. I think it's time I bail on that we're a family here operation. Update. I'm going in Monday for my final pay, so it may have just turned into a you can't quit, you're fired situation. But at this point, what does it matter? The semantics of the situation do not and will not change the root of the issue, and it will not change my decision to cut ties. It also won't change any views of those involved, and those who are in that environment. Those loyal to that company may say things, "I can't handle the pressure," or things similar to that nature, while others who are in my shoes or understand the work or time I've committed will understand I'm looking out for myself when those above me have failed to do so. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and have a nice day.